What is up, guys, and welcome back to the series where we're building a Lambda extension from scratch. In the previous videos, we essentially started writing code for the entry file. We wrote code for the helpers, and then we wrote code for registering the Lambda extension with the extensions API. In this video, we're going to look at writing the code that will create the server for us for the telemetry API. So essentially, our extension runs as a separate process, and in that process, we actually have a web server that's running locally within that execution environment, and this server essentially pays attention to or rather receives requests from the Lambda service on a specific API using a post request. Now, in order for us to cater for this, we then have to essentially write an express server. It's going to be a small express server in order to cater for that. All right, so I'm going to create here I'm going to say telemetry server, and then I'm going to say JS. So we're going to import express from express. Okay, remember we installed it as a package earlier on, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to essentially initiate express there. Then what I'm going to do is, while we have done that, I'm going to use middleware to then make sure that we are able to receive the body of the request as it comes in. Okay, then we just need to set some variables. We're going to have a variable for the listener host. Okay, but then we're going to have another one for local host if we wanted to do some testing here. We don't have to. In fact, let me just stick with this one for now, and then we're going to have a listener port, and the port is going to be 4243. Okay, it can be any port except 9090 because that's taken that's used by Lambda somehow, so we can't use that. So now what we're going to do in terms of our host listener, we're going to look for a variable within that environment called .env sam underscore local. Okay, so if that is true, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to set this to 0.0.0. If it's not, we are going to create our own essentially local domain, right? So we're going to say sandbox.local domain, and this just comes from the documentation. I don't quite understand why they want it done this way, but they just want it done this way. So and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna export any events then that are sent to our server here as an array. Now let's get started. We're gonna say const, we're gonna say start, which is going to be a async function. Okay. And this is the function that will export, obviously, as we're doing here, but we're going to import it in the index.js file, and there we'll be able to start the server. So I'm going to say console.log, and I'm going to say info, and then I'm going to say starting telemetry API server as a comment. Then what we're going to do is we are going to be listening for a post request, and then we'll say request res. Okay, and essentially what I'm going to do for now is I'm just going to say res.send. I'm just going to say okay as response. We'll come back to this and do some more logic, put in some more logic. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say listener URL. Listener URL equals HTTP and listener host, and then listener port. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're going to say this should listen to on the listener port. Okay, and this will be the host, and then we're going to have obviously that callback function where we then console log and say info server listening at, excuse me, at the, oh shoot, wait, I'm not using object literals here, so I'm going to do this. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to do that, and then we're going to say listener URL. Cool. And what we're going to do after we've done all of that is we're going to return the listener URL. And this is going to make, and this is why we're going to do this. It's because what we're going to, the reason we're doing that is because here, we're then going to do a step. Sorry, we're going to do a step here where we start the local server to receive data from the telemetry API. So I'm going to say const telemetry listener and say await. Let's say await start. Okay, and obviously it's going to bring start from telemetry server here. Now this is why we return the URL. We return the URL here. Remember, we're getting the extension ID here, and then we're returning the URL here, simply because we are then going to subscribe to the telemetry API. And for us to do that, we're going to pass it the ID, and then we're going to pass it the URL. The URL is important because this is the URL that Lambda will use to then send us telemetry data later on at various points of the lifecycle of the Lambda function. All right. Okay, cool. Hope that makes sense. But it's quite simple, nothing fancy. So all we did was, bring an express, set up the local environments that we need, and then, start essentially listen on a port and a host, return the URL here, and in between all of that, we then have this route that we're listening that is going to receive the post request from the Lambda service, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it. So again, I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to do the same thing here. I'm going to reveal this. Sorry guys, I just didn't build a pipeline beforehand. So I think it would have been better to do that, but yeah, we're gonna test manually. I think this is also, it's important to do it this way so that we see feel the pain and see the necessity of building a pipeline for this. So now we're gonna create a new version here. And of course, we're creating a new version that has the latest code that we are then going to edit the Lambda function so that it's using the latest code. Then we're going to run a test. Hopefully, I'm crossing my fingers, everything is working. Cool. So now let's come here. So now we're going to save. Once we save, here's the moment of truth. I'm sure we're going to have to debug something here. Perfect. We're listening on something. Cool. Yeah, we're getting somewhere. So we're registering. So now the next thing is to then subscribe, to the telemetry API so that we get metrics. And then in a video next after that, we will then handle, making sure that, we handle these lifecycle events properly. But yeah, I'm happy with where we are. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.